For as long as I've owned a home, I never imagined a simple crack in my driveway could trigger such a tangled web of HOA deceit, deals, and personal vendettas. But that's exactly what happened in Rosewood Hills, where one determined HOA president, Karen, tried to shake me down for thousands, only to have her scheme exposed in the most spectacular way possible. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment if you've ever battled an unjust repair mandate from your HOA. I bought my house in Rosewood Hills 3 years ago, lured by the peaceful streets, manicured lawns, and the promise of quiet suburban life. The driveway was far from perfect. There was a visible hairline crack running across one corner, but it wasn't big enough to cause any real issues. At most, I planned to patch it up or have it professionally sealed at some point. Little did I know that crack would soon become the focal point of Karen's relentless campaign. My first real encounter with Karen happened during a routine morning jog. She flagged me down by the community mailbox, flipping through a stack of envelopes. "Hi there," she called, smiling in that too-wide way that instantly put me on guard. "I'm Karen, the HOA president. I couldn't help but notice your driveway has some structural damage. It's important we keep our neighborhood looking pristine." She handed me a flyer that read, "Approved contractor for driveway repairs, special offer," with a phone number and a logo I didn't recognize. I skimmed the flyer, politely nodding. "Thanks," I said. "I was considering fixing it eventually, but it's not a huge priority right now. The crack isn't causing any harm." Karen's smile grew. "Oh, but we have high standards here. It would be wise to get it done soon. The HOA can issue violations for neglected repairs, you know." I felt a twinge of irritation. The crack was minor, certainly not neglected, but I shrugged it off, wishing her a good day. Over the next few weeks, I occasionally saw Karen around the neighborhood. She'd wave, sometimes reminding me about the driveway. At first, I chalked it up to an overzealous sense of community pride. Then came the first official notice. It arrived via email, citing a violation of Article 10, exterior maintenance, stating I had 14 days to repair my driveway or face a $100 fine. There was no mention of a mandatory repair timeline in the bylaws I'd read. I decided to reread the entire packet, focusing on Section 10. True, the HOA had the authority to require major structural fixes, but a hairline crack hardly qualified as major structural damage. I emailed Karen back, asking for clarification. She responded curtly, "The board has deemed it necessary for community upkeep. You must comply." Curiosity nudged me to ask my neighbors if they had received similar notices. Some had, especially those with minor driveway cracks or slightly shifted paving stones. The pattern became clear. Those who had indeed done the repairs had used the same approved contractor from the flyer, and they complained about the cost being exorbitant. One neighbor, confided in me that he paid nearly triple what another local contractor quoted, but he was too tired to fight the HOA. "I just wanted peace," he sighed, and Karen made it sound like I had no choice. That revelation hit me hard. It wasn't just about my driveway. It looked like Karen was orchestrating a profitable racket, forcing homeowners into expensive repairs through a single contractor. What I didn't know was how deep this scheme ran, or the shocking secret about Karen's own financial involvement in that contractor's company. That discovery would change everything, and push her to come after me in ways I never saw coming. Determined not to be scammed, I refused to hire the approved contractor. Instead, I contacted a reputable local paving company for a quote. Their estimate to fix the small crack was reasonable, a few $100s. I forwarded that quote to Karen, insisting it should suffice. Her reply was swift and unapologetic. "Only our official partners meet the HOA's standards. If you proceed without their authorization, you risk a violation that could escalate to legal consequences." The next day, a bright yellow notice was taped to my front door. "Second violation notice, driveway damage." The fine had now jumped to $200 if not resolved. Feeling cornered, I reached out to the HOA board members listed in the community directory. Most never responded, but one replied anonymously from a personal email address. "I can't publicly contradict Karen, but you should know she's close friends with the owner of that contractor company. Some suspect there's a financial tie. Tread carefully." A potential conflict of interest, that explained a lot. If Karen stood to profit from funneling repair jobs to her friend, it would motivate her to enforce questionable violations. Gathering evidence became my priority. I started by comparing repair costs for neighbors who'd used the approved service. The numbers were consistently inflated. A crack that should cost $300 to fix was billed at $1,200. Patching and sealing that local companies quoted at $500 soared to $2,000. The pattern of gouging was undeniable. At this point, I decided to talk to a consumer rights advocate, a local guy named Ron who hosted a small weekly radio segment on shady business practices. Ron had a network of investigative contacts. He suggested we dig into the contractor's business records. A quick public search revealed the business was formed just a year prior. The listed address was a small office across town, but no website, no long-standing reputation. Then came the bombshell. The owner was a man named Richard Miller, who was none other than Karen's brother-in-law. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. Armed with this information, I confronted Karen at the next HOA meeting, a monthly gathering held in the community clubhouse. Sitting in the front row with a stack of printed documents, I waited for the open forum. When my turn came, I presented the evidence: the overcharged repair invoices, the contractor's suspicious ties to Karen's family, and the violation notices that seemed to appear whenever a homeowner tried to use a different service. The room erupted in whispers and murmurs. Karen kept a calm exterior, but her eyes flickered with anger. She tried dismissing my claims as baseless rumors and a personal vendetta, but her composure slipped when I mentioned the business registry records that listed her sister's husband as the contractor's owner. The tension in the room was palpable. One of the board members cleared his throat and said, "If there's any conflict of interest, we need to investigate this properly." Within a few days, I noticed an eerie shift in Karen's demeanor. She began parking her car across from my house, watching me come and go. Notes started appearing in my mailbox: "Fix your driveway or face legal action." But now the tone was almost threatening, as if she were beyond caring about protocol. Other neighbors reported receiving new violation notices for trivial things, like a leaf pile that hadn't been raked immediately or a small paint chip on a mailbox. Karen was lashing out, doubling down on her intimidation to keep control. I decided enough was enough. I hired a lawyer recommended by a friend who specialized in real estate disputes and HOA corruption. She advised we gather affidavits from neighbors who felt coerced. A surprising number were willing to come forward. Some had thorough documentation of Karen's repeated threats. Drafted a collective complaint accusing Karen and the HOA board of breach of fiduciary duty, conflict of interest, and practices. The main evidence was the forced use of a single contractor owned by Karen's brother-in-law. Once the complaint was filed with the county, word spread like wildfire. The local media sniffed a scandal and interviewed several homeowners, including me. Karen's house became a focal point of quiet protest. People would walk by and glare. A few even took pictures of her property. Rumor had it she'd invested in some serious exterior upgrades a few months back, done at a huge discount by the very same contractor. Karen tried a new tactic, claiming her brother-in-law's business was simply the best qualified and that any financial tie was coincidental. But the community wasn't buying it. A few board members resigned rather than be associated with the looming lawsuit. Others sided with the homeowners, demanding Karen step down. She refused, clinging to her position with iron determination. One night my phone buzzed. A neighbor, frantic, told me that someone was at my driveway pouring some liquid over the cracks. I raced outside with a flashlight. The silhouette of a person dashed away in a truck. My driveway now had dark streaks running through it, and a pungent chemical smell lingered in the air. It looked like an attempt to worsen the crack or stain the concrete. I called the police, who took a report. Though they couldn't identify the culprit, I strongly suspected it was either Karen or someone she'd hired, eager to make my driveway look even worse to justify her stance. The final showdown came when the county scheduled a hearing for the complaint. Karen showed up with a lawyer and we arrived with ours. Neighbors packed the room, many ready to testify to Karen's intimidation and suspect dealings. The hearing officer allowed each side to present evidence. We showed the inflated invoices, the violation notices, the conflict of interest documents, and even photos of the suspicious chemicals dumped on my driveway. Karen's lawyer tried to argue that the HOA had full authority to enforce repairs and choose preferred contractors. But the hearing officer pointed to state laws requiring HOAs to act in good faith and avoid undisclosed personal ties. It was a glaring breach of ethics. Sensing they were losing, Karen's lawyer tried to pivot, accusing me of orchestrating a smear campaign. But the testimonies from multiple neighbors sank that argument. Then came the moment that sealed Karen's fate. A board member, previously loyal to her, produced a private email thread in which Karen explicitly instructed the board to prioritize the use of Richard Miller's company for all driveway repairs and threatened to impose larger fines on anyone who refused. The board member said they'd had enough of Karen's bullying. The hearing officer's expression changed from measured neutrality to stern disapproval. It was clear a major ruling was coming, and Karen was on the losing end. But we had no idea how far-reaching the consequences would be, nor how quickly they would unfold. A week later, the hearing officer's decision landed like a hammer. The HOA, under Karen's leadership, was found to have violated conflict of interest regulations and engaged in unethical enforcement practices. The officer declared all fines issued in relation to the driveway fiasco to be null and void. Moreover, the county recommended further investigation into possible criminal charges for extortion and property damage, referring the case to the district attorney. Karen was served with official notices that she could face penalties or even arrest if the DA found enough evidence of her direct involvement. The fallout was swift and dramatic. Karen resigned as HOA president within days. The new interim board promised sweeping reforms, stating they would hire a third-party auditor to review all recent contracts. Many residents demanded refunds for the inflated repairs, and the contractor's business faced a surge of complaints. Richard Miller's shady operations shut down shortly after, with local news covering the scandal extensively. As for my driveway, I finally got it repaired by the local company I'd initially chosen, at a fraction of the cost Karen's brother-in-law had quoted. I even had some decorative stonework added just for the satisfaction of it. It stood as a symbolic victory for me, and for everyone else fed up with HOAs that act like personal dictatorships. In the aftermath, several neighbors thanked me for standing up to Karen. They said they felt powerless before but found courage once they saw someone refusing to back down. The sense of relief was palpable throughout Rosewood Hills. People began chatting more openly, organizing block parties, and offering to help each other with minor home repairs or yard work, no fear of violations looming overhead. Karen's home went on the market. She left quietly with no public farewell. Some neighbors whispered about possible criminal charges, but those details remained unclear. All I know is that the community felt lighter, more honest, and more united in the wake of her departure. My only regret was that it took so long to expose the truth, but sometimes exposing corruption requires someone willing to stand up and say, "No more." And that's how a single crack in my driveway led to unraveling a web of corruption in my HOA. If you found this story riveting, don't forget to hit subscribe, smash that like button, and leave a comment about any crazy HOA scandals you've witnessed. Thank you for watching, and remember, never underestimate the power of speaking out against what's wrong, no matter how small the issue may seem at first.